I'm a UX designer, and today we're going to be doing a quick UX breakdown of apartmentlist.com. A UX breakdown can be thought of as a mini audit, meaning we're going to go over one or two aspects of apartmentlist.com and reflect on the wins and losses of the experience and discuss maybe some of the strengths and weaknesses. Now, I should mention that this is just me, one UX designer's perspective on apartmentlist.com. And that means that it was not done in conjunction with Apartment List or anybody else. So this is just one person's perspective. So with that said, let's look at how apartmentlist.com helps me find an apartment in San Francisco, hypothetically. All right. So right off the bat, I can tell that there's a few things that are working very well for them below the quote unquote fold in this section. When I go over a card, it reveals information on the map about its location and price. And it gives me contact information. It gives me a quick breakdown. The top level hierarchy here provides a really good layout of key questions. And it also has this nice little unique value proposition. Sorry, it has this really nice, unique, valuable part where it lets users explore more about the city itself. So, why is apartmentlist.com prioritizing this? What value is it going to provide to the user? Let's see where it takes us. Okay, so it's asking us to select that again. Maybe that was my mistake. Now, when it comes to sliders, as a general rule of thumb, it may be important, scratch that, it is important to have a text field to enter in specific numbers. And this isn't also just for improving the ease of the user experience. There's also an accessibility concern. I'm very fortunate that I can freely move my hands left to right and up and down. So not everyone has this. So let's say in this scenario, let's keep the number at a reasonable $3,500 a month, quote unquote reasonable. Now, I'm fortunate that I also have a little bit of knowledge of San Francisco, and I know that Daly City is a city I would consider when I would look at apartment hunting. But I also know that all of these options are not as equidistant to San Francisco as Daly City is. So for the user that doesn't have that context, this doesn't let them know how far away these cities are. So this particular part is good, but there's a lot of potential that I could still tap into. On-site laundry is important. It's also important for me to know how many steps I've gone through, which I don't remember. And it's also really important for me to know how many steps I still had ahead of me. And speaking of the steps I went through beforehand, I don't have a way to go back to them except within the browser itself. But we don't need to do that right now. So we're just going to keep moving forward. Parking is important. It's also important to let users know that if a step is skippable, just to err on the side of caution, let them know that they can skip it. There's an argument to be made that because the button state doesn't change when I have this option selected or deselected, it's easily to be inferred that this is skippable, but to clearly let it be known that it's skippable is a win, unless so many of your steps are skippable that maybe they weren't really providing value to begin with. This section does provide utility. It has a good layout, the iconography works, and it's giving me more customization options. One option that could help improve this entire experience is with each stage, it can help me know how how many apartments are being customized, the curated list, how much that is being customized based upon my inputs thus far. So that said, a dishwasher would be important for me in this hypothetical situation. Based upon the degree of questions that have been asked up until this point, I would make the assumption that if I were to select a dog, it would also ask about breed and weight restrictions. But since that isn't happening here, I wonder if this is going to cause some additional strain for users in the future, where they also have to jump through hoops that they may not have been expecting for apartments. Staying in a location I want is useful. I see this copy has the intention of being reassuring, but I interpret it as maybe not being needed at all. I see that whatever I choose, the copy doesn't change, which tells me that this doesn't have an impact on my quote unquote curated list. So we'll see what happens. Now, for some users, this could be a big turning point. They may not have a specific date and time in mind. Now, in this hypothetical scenario, October 1st works for me, but for a number of other users, this could be a big issue for where they abandon apartmentlist.com and may never return. So some option to let users know that they don't have to commit to a date and time yet would be a big win for Apartment List. And they have these options after the calendar. So my recommendation would be have this come before the calendar, and then that way the answer they provide here would then provide the UI the user would need based upon their answers. So in this scenario, I want to move, but I'm in no hurry. This is important to provide choice to the users. But for the average lease, you're looking at 6 to 12 months being the standard, 12 being the almost universal default. There's some outliers of 18 months and even 24 months. But if you're going to have users go outside of the default, it may be important to provide a, maybe not a warning, but a friendly reminder that this might be severely limiting their choices. So we'll keep it at 12 in this scenario. A useful question to ask. Now, in this hypothetical, let's say business is good and we're on an average of 10K a month. This question is intimately tied with the rent budget that I determined earlier on in the experience. And there's a strong argument that these two should be right next to each other. However, from the product perspective, from the business perspective, I could see this also turning away users by asking such a sensitive question in the beginning. So the argument to be made for this at the very beginning is strong because they have such a deep relationship with each other, but the argument to keep these two separate in the way that they have is also strong to make sure that users can complete it. Nice little bit of microcopy lets me know that I'm reassured with my financial budget. No, I've never been evicted in this hypothetical scenario. And what I went through was a onboarding funnel for my curated list. But I didn't know I was going through an onboarding funnel for my curated list. I may have missed a piece of copy in the beginning that explicitly implied that this was onboarding for an account, but it was not clear. Perhaps the worst part is the value of the metrics and questions and data I inputted could have been put in at the very first page that showed me the results of the map and the card layout. And then I would have been able to have had that customized list in a few clicks with progressive disclosure through each answer I provided. So based upon that and the lack of transparency around the onboarding, I would have to give Apartment List a C. So definitely room for potential to grow, and there's some solid UI trends and design in the experience. And there are some questions that they have to ask, and they ask them well, but definitely room to grow. Thanks for joining me for this UX breakdown, and I hope to see you next time.